Welcome back to Monday Night Politics. Tonight we have with us one of the three Democratic candidates for Attorney General for the state of Texas. We have Mr. Lee Merritt, who was originally scheduled to be with us on last week and was called away. But we want to say welcome to Mr. Merritt. Thank you so much for attending tonight. We'll start with a 2-minute opening statement. Talk to the camera. All right.
Hello, my name is Lee Merritt, and I am humbly asking for your help becoming the next Attorney General for the great state of Texas. I'm familiar to the Dallas community because this is where I started my civil rights practice. It was from here in Dallas that I began to represent families who had their rights violated by state actors, by corporate discrimination, and by other forms of hatred. One of the first major cases that I took in this region was the case of 15-year-old Jordan Edwards. And we were able to help secure one of the first convictions of a police officer in Dallas County in almost 50 years. We went on to represent the family of Ahmaud Arbery and Botham Jean and Tatiana Jefferson, and honestly, far too many names. The way I like to discuss it sometimes is through an analogy about finding babies in the river. There's a story of a young man who saw a bunch of baby in the river, so he hopped in the river and pulled the baby out and returned it to the mother standing on the shore. But before long, he heard the cry of yet another baby, and he hopped back into the river, and he received the praise of the community for repeating his heroics over and over again, until finally he asked, who's throwing all our babies in the river? Dallas, I'm asking you, who is throwing all our babies in the river? I've worked not only as a constitutional attorney, but as an organizer, working for the Texas Organizing Project, helping to start the Grassroots Law Project, where we elect progressive prosecutors through Dallas County, Bexar County, Travis County, all throughout the state of Texas, so that we could push forward a human-based agenda with practical, common-sense solutions for things like the war on drugs, for the mental health crisis, in a unique attack on our public schools and on women's rights. I'm the attorney for this moment to stand up for the people of Texas, and I'm asking for your help to become your next Texas Attorney General. Thank you.
Mr. Merritt, you've referenced or referred to the Attorney General's office as the people's lawyer.
That's right.
How has the current Attorney General failed to be the people's attorney?
Well, Mr. Paxton seems to be interested in only serving one client, one person, and that's the person of Donald Trump. And in many ways, he has acted as his personal attorney, filing lawsuits against the state of Georgia, for example, to overturn the outcome of their election. That was failing the people of Texas. He stamped that embarrassing lawsuit on behalf of the people of Texas. He's gone after Texas women, trying to enforce a ridiculous statute that flies in the face of basic principles of law, such as standing, and basic constitutional principles well settled by Roe v. Wade. Now, there's an argument that Roe v. Wade is under attack and it may fall, but until it does, it is the law of the land and it's the responsibility of the Attorney General's office to uphold it. As a former school teacher, one area in particular that has bothered me about the current Texas Attorney General is his unique assault on public schools and local controls over both our academics and our safety in the classroom. This Attorney General has filed dozens of lawsuits against school districts across the country in an attempt to undermine the elected officials, the school board representatives, the superintendents, our teachers and our educators, making our classrooms a political playground. I have 5 children, all under the age of 12, in our public schools here in Texas, and it is our responsibility as parents and my responsibility as the people's lawyers to stand up and fight for them.
And the last two, you referenced it, in fact, the last 2 attorneys general of the state of Texas, where the number of times that they sued the federal government as a badge of honor. So how is that, how can you reconcile that to the failure of those attorneys general to be the lawyers for the state of Texas?
Well, it sometimes seems like the Republican Party has forgotten that we are one member in the United States of America. Now, I think that Texas is the best state in the country, but we are still a part of this country. And as such, there are certain minimal rights that we are expected to protect. And they have seen it as a badge of courage that they've repeatedly filed suit against our Department of Justice. the Republican Party has taken the Attorney General's role since the last time a Democratic has held that position and expanded it tremendously. The growth of the Texas Attorney General office to an office that has a budget of $1.26 billion, over 3,000 employees, and a unique Solicitor General position that just started when Cornyn was the Attorney General. And when Paxton was the Attorney General, Governor Paxton was the Attorney General, he appointed Ted Cruz as the Solicitor General, and he gave him this charge. He says, look over the state, and if you can find conservative values to fight for, then I'm encouraging you, using taxpayer dollars, to do it. We need a charge in the opposite direction. We need to hire talented, elite solicitor generals who can take on the assault on voting rights that's occurring across the country, who can take on the human rights crisis at our border to ensure that there are translators, judges, attorneys there, social workers there to meet that crisis instead of a buildup of militarization that does none of us any good. We need an attorney general who will stand up for some of the highest property taxes in the country, someone who is a consumer protector and is dedicating his craft to fighting for the things that actually impact the people of Texas.
Our candidate for Lieutenant Governor, who was with us earlier, addressed the question of how they would use that seat to ensure our voting rights are preserved. How will you approach that as the state's Attorney General?
Sure. And in answering the question and how I plan to protect our voting rights, some of it has to do with working with the DOJ, as you just mentioned. Now, my client is always going to be the people of Texas, and it's my responsibility to advocate not for what's best nationally, but what's best for the people of Texas. And those two things do not have to be diametrically opposed. The Department of Justice has filed lawsuit against the state of Texas because of a clearly racist and gerrymandered map. That is not a suit that I would oppose them on. It is obvious that map is a violation of the Voting Rights Act. It's a violation of basic tenets of fairness, and I would take them up on looking for ways for Texas to improve. One of my good friends and classmates from Morehouse College, Chris Hollins, fought, and one of my brothers in Omega Psi Phi fought to make voting easier in Harris County. He brought 24-hour polling locations. He brought drive-through voting locations. He made mail-in ballots easier to access. And the Republican legislator did all that they could to roll those protections away. Well, I've learned as a civil rights practitioner that those accommodations that Chris Hollins fought so hard for in Harris County serve more than anybody else Americans with disabilities. And under the Federal Americans with Disabilities Act, our state actors are required to make reasonable accommodations for the least of those among us. And this is how this plays out. Because ADA, individual citizens with disabilities, exist in a protected class, you can't ask whether or not they belong to that class when they go to the polls. That means under federal law, it is our responsibility to make reasonable accommodations for those with disabilities, but you can't ask them if they have disabilities, so you make those available for all of us. When I pursue litigation on behalf of the people of Texas, I will be asserting the protections offered through the federal government under the ADA, which I believe will expand our access to voting.
So we'll do this final question and roll your closing. I know you have another appointment that you have to make it to. So quite obviously, you will be the first black Attorney General of the state of Texas, running as a Democrat. And we've had this Republican-controlled state government for years. How will you assure all of Texas that you'll be the Attorney General, the lawyer for all of Texas, and get accomplished the things that are very, very, very personally important to Texas's black community?
Absolutely. So as a Texan and as a black man, I am unapologetically black, and I have a responsibility from my position as the people's lawyer in my private practice, and certainly as the people's lawyer for the state of Texas, to take on issues with urgency. And so when we begin to talk about the deadliest police culture in the modern world, or the most incarcerated nation in human history, that's something that impacts us all. Now, just because it disproportionately impacts black and brown citizens doesn't mean that it should not be urgent for other members of the state of Texas. And so, no, I will not back down from my lifelong fight to end the era of mass incarceration and end the war on drugs that really played out as a war on black and brown communities. But I've demonstrated over and over again through my practice that I can work across the aisle. I was one of the few people without cameras present that went into the Trump White House and discussed executive orders necessary to ensure that people with disabilities, for example, are not met with violence. Right now, they're 16 times more likely to be encountered with violence. I knew that they didn't necessarily care about my skin color in that White House, so I brought to them first responders, firefighters, police chiefs who had had their loved ones killed or brutalized by first responders. I went on to make that argument before the United States Senate. I continue to make that argument before the Biden DOJ, who this month will be releasing additional executive orders in lieu that will help protect Texans in lieu of their failure to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. My career has been built in locations not like Philadelphia or California with large bastions of progressives, but I've built my careers in the Hunt counties, in the Bell counties, and Tarrant counties. I've fought hard and worked across the aisle to represent all Texans, and I will continue to do that as the next Texas Attorney General.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your attendance tonight. Mr. Lee Merritt, candidate for Attorney General of the state of Texas. Thank you, sir.